morning. My name is Lorrie. Welcome to Build a Block Wednesday. As you can see, I have laid out the stripe part of our little flag block today. It will finish at 12 and a half inches, so it finishes at 12. There needs to be a little 6-inch star here. So I am going to show you the 3 ways to make the flying geese to go in the star, because for my little quilt, I am making 3 of these blocks. And I told you that we would be making 8 blocks. So I do have, I don't know if you can see it or not. I'll zoom in when I have this up on the board. I will also post this over on my blog. So it uses all 8 blocks, plus it repeats the road to the White House along the outside edge, and some filler blocks that will be very graphic. So by the time we are done, if you don't design a layout for yourself, I have designed one for us, and I'm calling it Patriotic Build-A-Block. So the first one is the flag blocks, and they go along the top, all 3 of them with a spacer strip in between. So let's get started on those 3 ways to make flying geese. I'm going to go all low-tech on you for a minute. I want to sum up the 3 ways to make flying geese. So the first way is very simple and to the point. Let's divide this up in 3. I love graphic organizers. So the first way, you are basically making half square triangles. And as you know, to do half square triangles, 2 at a time, you add a half to your finished size. The second way is the sew and flip method. So you start out with the regular size goose, you sew over the corner, flip it, trim it, so on and so forth. And the third way, I'm going to call it the flock of geese method. Where you make 4 at a time. So, I am making 4 geese for all of these stars. So the first one I need for the corners of the blocks, I need 4 2-inch square triangles. And for the points of the stars, I need, since I'm finishing at 2, I add my 1/2 inch, and I need 4 2.5-inch white and 4 2.5-inch blue for the background. And that will take care of that method. This information will all be typed out on my blog so that you can see it. Now for the sew and flips, I need my geese, which are 2 by 3.5. I need 4 of those. And then I need enough pieces that I can sew and flip. So I need 8 plus my 4 corners. So I need 12 to make the whole block. So that's enough for around the outside of the star. And last, the flock of geese method. That's what I'm calling it. I know everybody calls it 4 at a time, so I'm going with flock of geese method. It sounds better. I need a background that is 1.5 bigger than the finished size of the goose. So 3.5 minus the half, because it finishes at 3, plus 1.5 is 4.5. So I need a 4.5-inch goose square. And I need 4. This needs to be 1 inch bigger than the side, so they finish, well, it's 2 minus 1.5, so 1.5 plus 1 inch is 2.5. So I need 4 of those to make my 4 at a time geese. Now, this is the outside edges to make the geese and the little square corners. Oh, I forgot my little 4 2-inch pieces here. I will have to make sure I do that because I did the corners here, but no corners. So I will take care of that in just a moment. But I want to show you these centers first. Let me set these are the centers of our blocks for the little stars. And I think I'll put this one going this way and this one going this way. So when they're all in a row, that one will be the one that is different. So those are the centers of the stars. They are all cut and ready to go. I will be back in a minute and we will start making geese. I'm starting with the half square triangles. I will do these in order. So to do the half square triangle method, let me push this up out of the way a bit. I need to draw some lines across the middle of the back so that I have a cut line. So using the Frixion pen, I'm going to draw a line, and then that will be my cut line. I will sew 1/4 inch on either side to get my 2 triangles, and then I will need to trim. I do always oversize, and it's not that I can't sew straight. It's just that I would rather have it be the perfect size after I trim it than have to fudge and fiddle with things while I'm trying to piece the whole thing together. Uh-oh, I think my pen is running out of ink. That could be, I have a refill for it, it's all right. So let me just pair these up, put my little corners there, and I will take these to the sewing machine. Whoops, oh, I almost did that wrong. I don't want it to be one of those days. Right sides together, and I will go sew and make myself 8 little half square triangles to turn into 4 geese. I will be back in just one moment. Okay, I am back from the sewing machine. I have them sewn. You can see where I've sewn on either side. I just cut them with scissors. If you would like to, if you are very worried about it, and you'll notice it's a scant quarter, if you are very worried about it, you are welcome to trim with the rotary cutter and a ruler. I find great joy in sometimes using scissors to cut things. And like I said, these will need to be trimmed because that is how I sew 2 at a time triangles. I would rather be perfect in the end than worry about that perfect seam allowance, even though sometimes it is necessary to have a perfect seam allowance. So I will be back in a moment after I press. I have returned with my pressed little squares. I am not going to bore you with trimming all of them, but I am going to bore you with trimming a few. Now, there are several ways. You could do it with a regular ruler, and you know that I love my little stackety-wackety ruler. And my newest favorite is this turntable. I get nothing, no endorsements, none at all, but I love this. My friend bought this for me. And I need a 2-inch. So this is not going to work because it's a 2.5. So I am stuck with the stackety wackety. So I need to, well, you know, it's easiest if you turn it over. So I'm going to use my line to line it up. Now I could use a regular ruler. If you'd like me to refresh that, I can do that too. There's my 2-inch ruler, or 2-inch. I have drawn lines on my ruler so that I can see where the center of a 2-inch is. And the other side I've drawn lines so I can see where the center of a 2.5 is. So there's one block trimmed. Now, if you are using a regular ruler, like this one, this is one of my favorites. You want it to be 2 inches. And it is easiest if you find yourself the 45-degree line. There's the 60, there's my 45-degree line. If you find yourself the 45-degree line, the first time it should be over to here, and there's my 45-degree line. Line up now on this side, it should be exactly at 2 and the 45-degree line. And then this tip should be exactly at 2. And it should be lined up. This takes a little bit more thinking with a regular ruler, I think. But it won't hurt you. It'll make you stronger. And then everything is lined up at 2. And there you have a second perfect square. Now you'll notice those pieces I took off were not real big, but still needed to be taken off nonetheless. Let me finish trimming up the rest of these, and I will get to assembling the first block. Let's lay out the first of the stars. There's my center, and then we need flying geese. And then last but not least, we will need those little corners. And this yields a 6. It's going to be one of those days. There we go. Star laid out. Let me sew the seams. So this is number 1, with half square triangles to make up the geese. So there is the number 1 way to make a star with the 2 half square triangles. Time to move on to number 2, sew and flip. So this method, I have lines on my sewing machine that I don't really need to mark these. If you feel comfortable marking it, then do that. But I am going to go over to the machine, and I will be back in a minute to show you the first round of pieces that I've added on. After a brief interlude, I am back. I got the wrong pieces. I completely reversed the colors, so I'm going to set those aside for a different project. I need 4 of the dark blue geese, 8 pieces, 8 2-inch pieces for the points, and 4 blue pieces for the corners. So now I am ready for sew and flip, and I've also fixed the flock of geese 4 at a time. I needed a blue geese square to make those triangles, and I needed white to make the points, and of course the 4 blue corners. So now that I have fixed my mistake, it is time to get back to my sew and flip corners. Okay, I am back from the sewing machine. For just a moment, I have chain pieced these, so let me trim them apart. As you can hear, Nugget is here protecting us from birds, squirrel, leaves, blades of grass. So you probably should check and make sure that you have gotten the piece on there straight before you trim it. And again, I'm trimming with scissors. You can trim with your rotary ruler if you want. you have to, when you're doing geese this way, you need to press in some way, whether it be by hand or with a little pressing tool or an iron. I prefer to press with the hot iron before I move on to the next side. I am back from sewing on the second side. Make sure you check these to make sure they make a flying goose before you cut it off. Don't ask me why I'm recommending that today. Yes, it does involve the seam ripper. So let me get these trimmed and ironed, and I will be back in just a moment. Now, both of these methods we've done so far are pretty easy. The sew and flip method has a lot more waste when you're cutting away corners, and because it's a 2-inch wide piece, I don't bother to save these as bonus triangles. They're too small for even me. And the first way we did it, where we trimmed up the pieces, there was not nearly as much waste by trimming those little pieces. So let's lay out the second block. So that it is ready to sew. Maybe I should have timed how long it takes to do each one of these methods. So let me go sew that up. Looks very similar to the first block, doesn't it? You really can't tell in the camera. Okay, here is the second one done with flying geese units, the flip and stitch, all ready to go, all done. Time to move on to the third method. The Flocko geese method is what I'm calling it. You saw me do this on another block. I need to draw lines on the white blocks. Sometimes white fabric is very hard when it's white on white to tell which side is the right side. That is the right side. Again, I'm making these oversize so that I can trim, because that way I know that it is exact after I have trimmed it. And I just feel more comfortable doing it that way. If you want to come up with more exact measurements and not trim, that is your choice. But I have found in the past that that doesn't always work for me because fabric has different stretch, and when you're putting two fabrics together, they have two different stretches. So to start this method, we lay the squares across like this. We make sure the lines are lined up. If you're worried about that sticking out, just take a little nip off the tip. And that should keep it from sticking out in the middle of your flying goose, even though I've never had a problem with that. I am going to put a couple of pins in there that I will pull out as I sew, just so it holds it on there. The outside edges should be lined up. And you are going to sew 1/4 inch, or in my case, a scant 1/4 inch down both sides. Be back in a minute. I have sewn on both sides, a scant 1/4 inch, and I am using scissors to cut on the line. Then I am going to press so I end up with this heart-looking shape. Now for the final step. you take your last 2 squares, put 1 on each. They should line up here along the edges, and there should be about 1/4 inch down right there. I'm going to pop a pin in there so my efforts of lining it up don't go to waste between here and the sewing machine. And again, I'm going to sew a scant 1/4 inch on each side, and then we will do some trimming. As you can see, I've sewn on both sides of that, and when I cut it apart, I now have 2 flying geese and 2 more flying geese for a total of a flock of 4. Time to trim up these geese. Time to trim up the flying geese. So I'm using the slicey dicey ruler. If this were 2.5 inches wide, well, first of all, I need to make sure I have 1/4 inch there. So I am not starting with the slicey dicey. I am starting with a regular ruler so I can get that 1/4 inch going first. Ooh, these are almost perfect. I'll say that the next one will be short or weird or something. Not getting a whole lot off of there. Not a lot of waste. Actually, I think I'm going to continue with this ruler to 3 threads. So the first 2 I had to redo because I trimmed that at 2 1/4. Better to trim them so they're too big and you have to trim a little more off than to trim too small and you have to go and remake them. It has been one of those kind of days. It has. So now I need to trim them at 3.5, and I think because this ruler has a fantastic center point, I think I'm going to use the rotating mat and the 3.5 inch ruler because it lines up. And then I'll just spin it and trim it. If you're just starting out, start out with the best set of rulers you can afford. You don't need a lot, just some basic ones. Matter of fact, I started out with one of these, and that was it. Ta-da! One goose. And then slowly, I added more rulers and more mats over time. I will be back in a minute to share my final thoughts on these three kinds of flying geese. Here are all three of the little starred blocks that go into the corner of the flag. They look the same, like they should, but there are some advantages to each method. The half square triangles, if you're a newbie and you're just starting out and you don't feel comfortable making the geese shape, this might be the technique that is easiest for starters, especially if you're trimming down and making 2 at a time. This method, sew and flip, you are starting with the right size piece, the right size goose. I'm going to go with correct size goose. So you know that it will end up, or should end up, being the right size no matter what. And this one, I oversize so you can trim. I think this is probably the fastest once you get used to it. I think half square triangles take the longest amount of time. But if, like I said, if you're new, that might be an advantage so you're not afraid of that shape. So let me finish these blocks and I will show you the finished product. Thank you for watching. Join me on Friday for Blab Fest. Please remember to like and subscribe.